gotta keep going. It gets hard, I know it. It gets hard, I just only come to the.
Hello everybody, welcome back. We are so excited to see you again, and as promised, this is the next iconic video, and today we're going to be talking about a very special and iconic woman. So just to give you a bit of an idea, I just want to talk to you guys a little bit about the Israelites. And the story that I'm talking about today takes place in Judges in the Old Testament. So before I get into it, I just want to give you a bit of a background. Now obviously a lot of you know that the Old Testament is quite hectic. It's quite it's a dark place, you know. The people sinned a lot, and God comes across as very angry, and he was angry with the people of Israel in the Old Testament. So there's this vicious cycle that happens in Judges, and it's so the Israelites, they are happy and they're at peace and life is good, they're good with God, and then they start doing evil things and they sin, and then God gets upset with them, and then he hands them over to their enemies and says, okay, you want to do evil, here you are, live with your enemies, live in the bad evil stuff that you're doing. And then they really struggle, and then they call out to God and ask for forgiveness and for him to save them. And because God loves us and he's this forgiving God, he gives us grace that we don't deserve, he of course saves his people, and then they obey him. And then when everything's good and they've got peace, they start to disobey and they start to sin, and so the whole cycle starts all over again. So that's just to give you a bit of an idea of what we're talking about today. So God's people, the Israelites, were sinning and they were doing bad. They were doing bad things, and so God gave them over to the king of Canaan. So the ruler or the leader of the army of Canaan was Sisera, and Sisera was not a nice guy. We know that he was super powerful because the Bible tells us that he had 900 iron chariots, which obviously meant that on each chariot you could fit a whole bunch of soldiers. And so what happened was the Canaanites were really nasty to the Israelites. They bullied them, they oppressed them, they tortured them. They were just not good people. Or good to the Israelites, should I rather say. And so the Israelites were oppressed for over 20 years by the Canaanites. So during these years of oppression, they called out to God, and eventually they said to God, they were like, we can't do this anymore, we're being so oppressed by these Canaanites, we're sorry, Lord, please will you come and save us. And this is where we meet Deborah. So Deborah is the iconic woman, or one of the iconic women that I want to be talking to you about today. So during the time the Israelites had a bunch of judges that kind of facilitated certain things, they advised them. And Deborah was one of the judges. So in the Bible it says that Deborah was a prophetess, she was a wife, and she was a judge to the Israelites. So they said to Deborah, we don't know what to do, we need help, we need to fight back, we can't live an oppressed life like this. So in the story, this is where we meet Barak. So Deborah calls for Barak. And when Barak comes to her, she says to him, she says, I want you to gather 10,000 men, and I want you to march down to Sisera and to the Canaanite army, and I want you to defeat them. And so Barak says to her, he says, I'll only go if you come with me. And being the strong, courageous woman that Deborah is, she agrees to go with Barak into the battlefield. And so the day comes, he gathers his 10,000 men, and they go, and they're about to fight the Canaanites. But in your mind, you'd think that they stand no chance. They're a small nation, and Sisera's army has like 900 chariots, like of iron, super powerful. So the odds don't look really good. So anyways, they go into battle. And what happens is, as Sisera sees the 10,000 men approaching, he abandons his army, he abandons his fleets, and he runs away. So eventually he's running away through the little village or wherever, and he finds this woman named Jael. And he says to Jael, he says, I need a place to hide. Can I please stay in your tent? And gladly she accepts, she lets him in. But it turns out that Jael knows who this man is, and she knows what he's like. And so Sisera finds refuge in her tent, and he falls asleep. And this is a bit of a warning here, this is a bit of a wacky part of the story, but as he falls asleep, Jael drives a tent peg through his skull, and Sisera is dead. He's no longer. Bit of a weird story, but the reason I'm telling you this is because Deborah and Jael are the reason that the Israelites they overcame the Canaanites. So these two women in Bible times, Deborah, a judge, first of all, have you ever heard of a female judge back in hundreds and thousands of years ago? I mean, women had to fight to vote, I think in like the 30s or 40s, I could be wrong, but you know what I'm saying. And yet, in Bible times, God called one single woman to lead a whole army to go and defeat the Canaanites. And so when Barak said to her, I will go to war with you, I won't go if you don't come. She says to Barak, she says, okay, that's fine, I'll come with you. But the Lord has said, because of the way that you're handling the situation, you won't defeat Sisera. Sisera will be defeated at the hand of a woman. And like the story tells us, Sisera was defeated by Jael. And I just think that this woman is so iconic. Both of them are so iconic because God doesn't see prejudices. God calls people who are going to follow out on His word. He doesn't call men because they're stronger. He doesn't call women because they are more emotive and have a better sense of things. He doesn't see prejudices like that. He doesn't stop the young from making a difference. He calls everybody. And if God calls you, you need to know that you are anointed because He wants you. Not because you're a man or a woman or because you're young or because you're old. The story is so iconic because a single female led the whole army, 10,000 men, into battle. And we know very clearly, the Bible makes it very obvious to us that she's a woman because they say that she's a prophetess and that she's a wife. So even the Bible emphasizes the fact that she's a woman. And this chick just rocks that whole army. She leads them right in, and she's the reason that the Israelites had peace for 40 years after that. Now please don't misunderstand, I'm not saying that us as women, we need to take control, walk straight into battle and kill whoever's in our way. That's not at all what I'm saying, and that's not at all what Jesus calls us to do. Jesus calls us to love. So you need to understand the context in which the story takes place. But the message I'm trying to get across to you is that Jesus, or the Lord, called Deborah and He called Jael. And because of them, they were the success of His people. So don't ever put yourself down because of who you are, what gender you are, your age, your experience, or your knowledge, because God will equip you for anything that you need to do in this life. So I just hope that you just find the story as cool as I do, and I hope that we can all be Deborahs and that we can all just stand up and do what God calls us to do, not based on our own fears or our own inequities, because God will show up. He always shows up. The question is, will you?
Gotta keep going. It gets hard, I know it. Test only come to the testing. Yeah, it's hard to be chosen. I done seen my lows. Yeah, that's why I got hope. Trouble don't last always. I must get through it okay. I'm